Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 330 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight is always there. You're always waiting to hear her because, come on, Weer'd, get on with it! We want to hear Aaron Paulette! How you doing, Aaron?
I really want to mark myself safe from TikTok drama.
Is it actually banned?
Here. I mean, it was, but now it's not.
Okay.
Because the site is up right now, and I'm looking at it. I know it was down yesterday, which was Sunday. It might have been down on Saturday. I'm not sure. Who knows? But my point is, I don't care. If you enjoy it, fine. But the other thing I want to... Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say I don't have the app, and all the good ones are on YouTube Shorts.
The only other thing I have, completely unrelated to anything else, is the air hurts my face. Weird. I live in Florida. The air shouldn't hurt my face.
How cold is it, Aaron?
You're gonna laugh.
I am,
but I don't know. But it's in. Well, when I walked, when it hurt my face, it was in the low 40s. It might actually be in the Yes, it's currently in the high 30s right now.
All right, you know what, Aaron? I am not going to laugh because for Florida, that is freaking cold.
Yep.
And honestly speaking, it's one of those, like, not only is that freaking cold for South Florida, it's also not that much warmer than here. It was in the 20s all day here. And it is currently a blustery 15, but it's one of those like, yeah, but you're not that far off. But meanwhile, you're what 3,000 miles from me.
Yeah, so. I mean it's so cold that they had the inauguration indoors, and I'm just sitting here wondering. Why would you have an inauguration, a public event in frickin' January in frickin' Northern Virginia? Why? That's not a good idea. Don't do that. But no one asked me however many 100 years ago.
Yeah. It used to be like, I think in like March, but I don't know.
That makes more sense.
I think they just want to get on with it because what's the point of electing the president and then going months and months before they actually get seated?
I mean, we already do that. It's not months and months, but I mean, the election happens in early November. And so we've got the rest of November, all of December, and then most of January before the inauguration. So that's like 2 months right there.
That's true.
But other than me griping about the weather and the TikTok drama, how are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing all right. I drastically overtaxed myself this weekend. There was a lot of cooking. I just had a lot of plans for a lot of things. It was busy, and then it was one of those as I was getting ready to go up to New Hampshire to pick up my daughter, my wife gets a call, and something had blown up at my mother-in-law's, or fallen apart really, from the heating system. There was water leaking onto the floor at my mother-in-law's place. It was one of those, and she had to run out there, and she wanted me to bring some stuff, and it was one of those like, I need to leave now. And
yeah, I was about to ask if you meant blown up metaphorically or literally.
Yeah, it was, I guess the understanding was that the person who put the system together did a century arms job. It worked, just not well, and then fell apart. Like, evidently there was structural tape involved. But I made Indian food, I made crackers, and we went over to a friend's place for lunch, and we were talking about what do we bring for food, and it's one of those. I had all the fixing for a chicken pot pie, wanted to make one, and my daughter is going through a phase. She used to love it, now it's icky, and I just went, hey, I'll make one and bring it over to you guys, and all the adults appreciated it, and their kids declared it just looking at it that it was icky.
What kind of Indian food did you make?
I made rajma, which is just essentially a red bean curry, and then dal fry, which is red lentil curry.
Did you bake any naan?
I did make naan.
Okay.
You want to make sure that
I still think back and chuckle about the time I got you with that non-disclosure agreement joke.
Yes, that was good. Well, especially since I'm always interested, because this version of naan that I make is actually my own recipe. It's based loosely on another recipe, but I've modified it enough that it doesn't resemble the original recipe at all, and it works really, really well because there's so many different ways to do it. And my way's kind of supposed to imitate a tandoor by you make a very, very wet dough and then essentially smear it onto a baking sheet and then put it at the top of a raging hot oven with the broiler on, and it does a pretty good job. And I'm also
for our I thought you were done.
Oh yeah, and I use sourdough instead of yogurt to acidify the dough.
So for our listeners who will enjoy hearing me torment Weer'd with bad jokes, you can hear them on our blooper reel. You just need to be a patron. Not only will you hear the bread joke, but you will also hear a very effective joke involving the Nintendo character Mario. I think you'll like it.
It is. It's not a war crime the first time, but Aaron, I highly advise you to consider yourself before you tell that joke again. The Hague may have heard.
Oh, hey there, bud.
So shall we get into some news?
Yes. I'm hesitant because I hesitate to call it an article. It is technically one because it's written as one, but it's just so obviously propaganda vomited forth by Bloomberg's organization Everytown, and I had a visceral reaction to reading it, and so I know we need to discuss it, but I'm not looking forward to it. So
let me. I think that I had a different reaction than yours because it's so. Of course, yes, this is from The Smoking Gun, which I believe is it an offshoot of.
Okay, scroll down to the very bottom, and it's going to say copyright 2025 Everytown for Gun Safety Support Fund.
Gotcha. So this is essentially, it's not the trace, but it's the trace.
I mean, it's yet another arm of the Bloomberg propaganda machine.
Yes, and of course, I mean, it's also the standard issue is like every town has like 15 different divisions. Like there's just like that I don't even remember the stupid title for the website with the Lex Luthor gun dealer.
Something like, "Are you good with that?"
Yeah, I think so. But the point is, it's dumb. But yeah, that one was like Students for Gun Safety. So it's like it's not even the March for Our Lives anymore. They've rebranded March for Our Lives, but it's still just Everytown. It's still just Michael Bloomberg. But yeah, how I read this was, oh, this is exactly what I like the title, and the title is SHOT Show 2025 Preview: More Assault Weapons and Silencers. And then when I realized that it was an anti-gun article, I went, oh, even better, because it's anti-gun propaganda. Everything can be read with the Aaron sarcasm font. and all that. But the point is that according to even this anti-gun group, SHOT Show is filled with quote unquote assault weapons, and which I think we all know. That's the joke, is the fact that, oh look, here's another AR maker. Oh look, here's another double stack striker fired polymer frame pistol. Ooh, some of this is a double stack striker polymer frame pistol, but we didn't make it out of polymer. We made it out of metal this time for competition shooters. And it's just one of those yawn. And then add on the silencers. I think that this is just showing that the world is definitely getting sick of the way that the gun unfriendly states are treating the world. And I mean, I think it's generally said, by the time the DC versus Heller had come through, like DC was the weird. It was weird. It was DC and Illinois were the only places that had banned handguns. Every place else you could get handguns, all sorts, and maybe there was some rosters and all that. The Supreme Court isn't going to overturn like 90% of the nation's laws, but they will overturn a couple of them with all that. And so the idea that, okay, there's all these, quote unquote assault weapons and high capacity magazines and all of that. And meanwhile, we've got some assault weapons in magazine cases, none coming up right off the bat to the Supreme Court, but they've got to be seeing this sort of stuff. And then also lots of silencers, of which, I mean, like I watch some hunting shows on YouTube, and they're not like super duper gun nutty. They'll talk about if a gun's really good, but they're not like the gun of the month group and all that. And almost all of them are using suppressors now in hunting. And suppressors are just becoming kind of ubiquitous as far as like, if you're a gun nut, you've got a can or two. And
so your argument essentially is that when even Bloomberg acknowledges the ubiquity of silencers, then they are definitely in common use and need to be taken off the NFA.
That is exactly the point that I'm making, and that that politics are downstream of culture, and essentially I read this as a white flag of we're losing the culture war, but of course they're arrogant and uptight, so they're like, no, we can change this. And no, you can't.
Yeah. One thing that caught my eye in this article, because we had talked about them recently, they actually mentioned Mountain Billy Gun Lab. And I think it's interesting that they managed to be pearl clutching in just one sentence. I'm going to read the entire paragraph, which is only 2 sentences, just to give you an idea of context. And of course, sarcasm voice is on. One exhibitor, Mountain Billy Gun Lab, manufactures child-sized .22 caliber AR-15s. Several exhibitors also produce realistic-looking BB and airsoft guns, including replicas of assault weapons that may appeal to children.
You're damn right. Cry some more.
It's like, God forbid that children should be taught firearm safety using low recoil weapons like airsoft and BB, and then working their way up to .22 caliber, using a very popular format so that they retain the manual of arms. No, once again, Bloomberg is calling for abstinence-only gun education, and a pox upon them, I say.
Yeah, and I mean, that was also the big, like, it's really the big lie of no, we support the Second Amendment, we just want common sense gun reforms. And they even have, like, they'll parade out somebody that's a military veteran or somebody, and they'll say, I own a gun. And you have, like, Kamala Harris with I own a Glock. And it's one of those, like, yeah, but what about it? And he's like, well, so what's the safe way to own a gun? Well, just don't own a gun. If you have a gun, you'll commit suicide and shoot your family members and all sorts of horrors, and then it'll get stolen and sold on the black market. And so just don't have the gun. Like, I mean, most of the solutions that they are proposing to problems is just don't have the gun. And so, yeah, it's they are abstinence only education.
Mm. But talking about the lack of diversity in SHOT Show, it isn't on the topic list. I'm going rogue here. Brandon Herrerra had a video specifically about that, about how so many firearm innovations, quote unquote, are really boring. And then he mentioned the new Keltec pistol that not only is in 5.7 millimeter, but also it doesn't use a magazine. It uses a top loading clip. And regardless of what you think about the gun, and I'm not sure how I think about it, I do have to agree with Herrerra when he says Keltec comes up with some absolutely zany ideas, and God bless them, because they are at least innovating. They are at least amusing people. And then, they do things like create the Sub 2000, which the Smith & Wesson company decided to not exactly copy, but their FPC, the folding pistol carbine, it's like, where they got the idea. And in fact, Keltec had a Twix, where they branded themselves the Smith & Wesson product development team. And so that was a spicy response. So good for Keltec.
I mean, I'll say right now, I find my absolute favorite blues songs on earth are songs written by Robert Johnson but performed by Muddy Waters. Just the more modern person, and if you listen to Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters' voice is far more pleasing. Robert Johnson had a very high-pitched, squeaky voice. And that is the Keltec design, but made by one of the big major gun manufacturers. So it's not made out of beach plastic. Yeah, we definitely spent a lot of time talking about that new 5.7 pistol from Keltec on Handgun Radio, and I was very vocal about the fact that I don't like it at all. I mean, I personally think that it would be a blast to shoot, and it would be a whole lot of fun. And if I could get one in Massachusetts, I absolutely would. But at the same time, I don't really know what they're trying to accomplish here.
Well, as Herrerra said, and I had the idea before he said it, that they are trying to appeal to people in very gun-unfriendly states like California, or the upcoming legislation in Colorado, where if you have a magazine at all, that gun is illegal. And they're going, it's not a magazine, it's a clip.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the clip is feeding them into a magazine. So it's a fixed magazine. And in that case,
the point, it's not detachable though, and that's the important part.
Well, yes, and it definitely steps away from that California rule that does that, but it still is a large capacity magazine, which is illegal in Colorado, which is illegal in California, which is illegal in Massachusetts, which is illegal in Maryland. So I am unaware of a law that it can particularly sidestep, because you even have like that California legal P320, and the whole point of it is they just put a little raceway into it so that you can drop a single 9mm round into the gun, drop the slide, shoot it, and the slide locks open, and you can drop the next round in, and that is able to sidestep some of California's handgun roster issues. But if you put a fixed 20-round magazine in it, it would just be straight up illegal.
Why do you hate joy?
I don't hate joy. I'm just saying that if it's there to defeat illegal things, I'm just saying no, it's not. Don't. If you live in an anti-gun state that bans magazines, please don't try to get your hands on one of these and think that you're going to be safe. But otherwise, if you like bizarre Mad Max style guns, this is one of them.
This is certainly a gun of all time.
It is certainly a gun of all time, and let me tell you, it'll definitely turn some heads at some blog shoots. I mean, I will say right now, Oddball's Altor at the blog shoot got shot a lot, probably more than it's ever been shot before. Just in the span of a few hours, just because everyone wanted to pop off a round or two out of that piece of garbage. And go ahead.
Go on. No.
Yeah, and I will say right now, I had always said that Jay Grazio's P360 was easily the most was the most unpleasant gun to shoot when shooting 357 Magnums through. And then I shot the Altor back to back with that gun, and the Altor hurt my hand far more than a 12-ounce scandium frame titanium cylinder J frame with shooting full house 357 loads.
The Altor said, "Hold my beer."
Yeah. No, it's amazing how much that gun hurts. It is downright unpleasant. And actually, at one point, I had to say to warn Oddball, hey, just so you know, you're leaking out of your hand pretty badly. Something had bucked in his hand and taken a chunk out of one of his fingers, and we had to go source up a Band-Aid, and I just had to let him know, because we've all had that instance where we've cut our finger and not realized it, and next thing you know, you've got blood all over something, and you're just like, oh, great.
So when you mentioned Oddball, I thought you were leading up to saying that Oddball had bought one of those Keltec 5.7s. Because that's exactly the kind of thing he would do.
Well, I don't think that they're out to dealers yet, but let me tell you, especially if I've been hearing stories that they're going to be pricing them to sell. I think Oddball will definitely have to make a constitution check when he walks into a gun shop and sees one of those sitting in the case.
Okay. First of all, a constitution check would be used to resist, poison or nausea or whatever. The way you're phrasing it, to resist buying it, that would be a will check.
Thank you, Aaron.
And looking at the Keltec website for the PR57, the MSRP, and so it's always going to be lower at your friendly local game store, the MSRP is $399.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is definitely Soviet surplus prices.
Yeah.
Oh, good times. And yeah, hopefully the fact that this is going through will continue to drive down the price of 5.7, because it is a really cool cartridge, and with the price going down, it would be it would definitely make it for a better gun. And we've talked a bunch about, someone wrote an article about how in a parallel universe, if 25 ACP had essentially supplanted 22 long rifle, and then you suddenly had 25 long rifle, or would be 22 long, I think was what the 25 ACP is the equivalent of, and then 25 long rifle, and suddenly now there are revolvers and training guns and all that in 25 instead of that, and everything's center fire. And what's rim fire? Someone told me about that. People look at rim fire the same way we look at pin fire.
Mm-hmm.
Is the gun nerds know what it is? Everybody else is like, what the heck is he talking about?
Yeah, the 5.7 round isn't quite the boutique round it used to be, but it's still not very common. And I mean, while I'm not sitting here hoping that it becomes so common that you can find it at metaphorical Walmart, I don't know if Walmart even sells ammunition anymore, but I'm in favor of greater ammunition choice in retail. So, hooray for that. And also, it holds 20 rounds. That's impressive.
Yes. And also, speaking also of Keltec is, and this happened like, I guess a little while ago, but I didn't realize it, but Keltec has released a sub 2000 in 5.7.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's very interesting.
I'm still not sure how I feel about it, but I know that I feel it a lot more strongly now.
Keltec, take a big old bump of the nose candy and make one in either your choice, dealer's choice, 10 millimeter or 357 sig.
I mean, I know people who have wanted a sub 2000 in 10 millimeter for over a decade at this point. I don't know why they haven't done it yet.
Well, especially since High Point has a carbine in 10 millimeter.
Right.
And if you look at the ballistics, like 10 millimeter, at least inside of like 100 yards, suddenly starts getting into like intermediate rifle range when going out of a 16-inch barrel. It's moving. So yeah, that was, but yeah, Keltec does do some really, really amazing innovations and just tries out some very, very interesting ideas. And whether or not they work or not, well, that's for the world to find out.
I still wish, and I understand why they haven't, but I wish that they would release a semi-auto version of the KSG.
Yeah. Nobody really has a there's the bullpup shotgun that Xander and Oddball have, but yeah, there's no like double tube semi-auto out there, and I don't know if there's a reason besides just we're doing this because it will be legal in more states. I don't know.
The way I heard it from someone who works with Keltec is that they decided it would invite more trouble from the ATF than Keltec really wanted to deal with.
Yeah, because of course, the special thing to note is that like all shotguns need, it's very similar to like the arm braces or the bump stocks or all that. All shotguns need kind of a blessing from the ATF because they are over 50 caliber and so therefore need to be quote unquote sporting.
Yeah, because they're destructive devices technically, but there's a sporting exemption. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So yeah. So all of your shotguns, and that's why like the AA-12 is the Striker Street Sweeper are considered destructive devices, even though they're just 12 gauge shotguns. 12 gauge. I mean, the Street Sweeper isn't even quite technically a semi-auto. But yeah, they're just regular old shotguns, just the same way as a Saiga 12 is. And was a lot of talk that the ATF may reconsider the Saiga 12 a destructive device. So there's all sorts of goofballery with all of that. And yeah, we're recording this on Inauguration Day, and we are definitely hoping to see an actual like head of the ATF that likes guns, because it's super duper strange that like we have ATF directors that hate guns and hate gun owners. It'd be kind of like having like a surgeon general who's like a holistic medicine person. Oh no! Don't use pharmaceuticals or all that. Here, chew this root. Wear this crystal.
What's the name of the practice where water has memory, and if you dilute it a bunch of times, it becomes more powerful?
That's homeopathy.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the name.
And yes, if you do the calculations for some of the formulations out there, there is a very, very good chance that there is actually no active ingredient in the factory that makes them. It's something like there might be one molecule in like 100 pounds of the stuff.
Fun.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. All right. But let's go on to some good news. David found this one and just was like so flabbergasted. It's in a blooper reel when he discovered it. Like we were talking about something else and he's like, no, I got to pull the handbrake. We got to go full stop. This is absolutely the most amazing thing I've ever heard. So this story comes from Brooklyn, New York. So in New York City, a young man was walking through the park at nighttime, and somebody attacked him with a knife and demanded his money. And this guy had a concealed carry permit and a registered handgun, and produced the registered handgun and fatally shot the attacker. And that's a little bit impressive, but the most impressive thing is, according to the district attorney, they do not believe the gunman will be charged in the attacker's death.
Yeah, that's really shocking. I'm also shocked that okay, I'm going to call the person who shot in self-defense the victim. The article doesn't say that. The article claims that the mugger who died was the victim. But I'm really surprised that the mugging victim wasn't in one of those prohibited places in New York that, according to Hochul, is, what is it, a few streets and avenues.
Yes.
I thought for certain that a park would be prohibited because that's where people are.
Yeah, I haven't really been following it and going on. I believe there has been some court attack on some of this stuff too. So I don't know if they're also, maybe he was in a quote unquote sensitive place, but they're deciding not to pursue that for fear that they might draw more attention than they want to their terrible law.
Could be.
But yeah, one of the interesting things is that the mugger had no prior arrests and no previous contact with the New York Police Department, according to the police, which is interesting. But and again, this is just a interesting coincidence. He was planning on attending the upcoming funeral of his cousin, who was gunned down in a shooting. So it certainly does imply that maybe he was involved with some stuff, even though he had not had previous contact with the police. He certainly was not a nice guy if he was running around with a knife in the park and asking for people's money.
You put it so politely, asking.
Yes.
I mean, he had the knife at the victim's throat. That's demanding money on pain of death.
That is. And yeah. And he got the pain of death.
How's that phrase go? A fatal choice in the victim selection process?
Yes. Yep. And actually, and honestly speaking, that is a great way to think about it, because I mean, we see it all the time. Is anti-gun states often have higher violent crime and other predatory stuff, and one of the reasons for it is, hey, if you're in a state where people get shot for doing stuff like that, you pick other things to do because it's not worth rolling the dice.
Concealed carry is herd immunity against crime.
It absolutely is. A famous person said that quote. It was Aaron.
I don't think so, Weer'd. Thank you.
A big deal said that.
But if y'all are curious or interested, I should say, that's available as a T-shirt on the Blazing Sword store. I'll link to it. So if you want to buy one, you can carry my words of wisdom, and also help out my charity. So that's good for both of us.
Yeah, go check out the show notes. But yeah, and then so now moving into this one. This one was just fun. Is that this is in a there's currently an argument in the Third Circuit against New Jersey's assault weapons ban, and the lawyer in favor of the ban actually made the statement that the earliest large capacity magazines beyond 10 rounds were designed specifically for use by soldiers during World War II.
Girondoni air rifle says what?
Exactly. Yep. That's 20 round magazine for an air rifle. It was intended as a military arm, but I think at that point in time, though, like the world just didn't care. So I'm sure there were also farmers and hunters and all that using that air rifle as well. But then they also point out that the expert in the state cites specifically notes that the high power came with a 13 round magazine and was endorsed in 1935. So yeah, this is just.
Do I need to point out that World War II started in 1939?
No, I don't think you do. I don't think you do. Yeah.
Just in case, there it is.
Yep. There it was all sorts of you've got the great Henry rifle. Those crazy Yankees with their Henry rifles, they load them on Saturday and shoot all week. So yeah, this is just, it is very interesting on how much the anti-gun groups really pride themselves with ignorance, and they're really just don't care at all about guns and are willing to beclown themselves in such a way.
I laugh because the word beclown tickles me.
Yeah. All right, and this last one, I hope you have some key points out of this, because my eyes crossed in reading it. But you mentioned you posted this from the NRA in Danger blog about the January NRA board meeting, and you said that it was heartening.
Yes. I am now cautiously optimistic about the direction of the NRA. How do I put this in a way that's family friendly? It seems like they have corrected their rectal cranial inversion, and there's a lot here to be said, but so yeah, the short version is that the reformers are very much in charge, and one of the things was the finance chair indicated that the NRA budgets for the past 25 years have been based on wishful thinking, and that stops here. And they've prepared a balanced budget based on reality. The special executive vice president search committee has been gotten rid of, and now it's been renamed the Special Committee on Leadership Criteria. And in general, the committees that were problems really seem like they have been gutted and are no longer problems. And so I'm cautiously optimistic, and if this continues, I may become an NRA member again.
Yeah. This is good news. I mean, it's one of those we've been seeing the rumbles of it, and again, you're kind of a fool if you're not cautiously skeptical, because oh boy, the level of corruption and shenanigans that was going on within the NRA, especially with Wayne LaPierre and his cronies, was not something to sneeze at. And so much of how the bylaws had been changed since the Cincinnati Revolt, has really made it so. I mean, so how many times have people tried to off-seat Wayne LaPierre for his corruption and failed? And really, it took outside, an outside, essentially political witch hunt to actually successfully do it.
Mm. All right, so some more key points here as I peruse this. The Special Litigation Committee has been abolished, and it was passed by an overwhelming voice vote. Jeff Knox decided, he put forth the proposition that instead of a whole bunch of things being held in executive session, he wanted to go into executive session only as necessary in individual items, and that passed as well. Finally, it seems like NRA's planned move to Texas isn't happening, and they have fixed a lot of the problems with the NRA building in Fairfax. There were reports of a leaky roof and things like that, and so the roof has been fixed. The top floor is now fully usable, and the NRA is looking to lease out offices in one of their towers. And honestly, if they're not using it, then that would be a great way to get some supplemental income. So, I mean, there's far more to it than that, but I just wanted to point those out as being interesting. And we've actually got some more on the happenings in the NRA because you interviewed someone who is in a position to know.
That is right. I sat down with longtime friend of the show, John Richardson, and he has an announcement to make. Well, I am pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, longtime friend of the show, John Richardson. How you doing, John?
I am doing well. It's great to be back with you, Weer'd.
Yeah, so you reached out to me because you have some news to share, and you want everyone to know, and I agree with that. So let's just get out of the way, and why don't you tell us the big news?
I am running for the NRA Board of Directors. I'm on the ballot nominated by the nominating committee, which shocked me beyond belief, and by petition. I'm one of two candidates that's double nominated.
Do you know the other one by chance?
John Sigler, who is on, let's just say, on the other side. Mm-hmm. I had people over the years that said, you ought to run for the board. You ought to run for the board. I'm like, nah. I can do better and more for the NRA by blogging about it, pointing out the issues where there's stuff that needs improvement. And then I finally said, well, maybe I could do more being on the board itself. And so my friend Todd Vandermeide, who used to be the NRA lobbyist out in Illinois and now is president of the largest gun club in Illinois, we mutually nominated one another. And you fill out a bunch of paperwork and you send in a biography, and I sent us a resume, which I had to put back together, and I forgot all about it. And I was actually out of the country, and I'm checking my email. It said, oh, congratulations, you've been nominated. I'm like, oh my God. But I also had started to run by petition because I think it's important. Running by petition means to me that you were on the ballot because the members themselves wanted you there. And so that's what I did. And I'm actually running as part of a slate called Elect a New NRA. And we have a website, electanewnra.com. There's 28 of us. There's 28 open positions. Two of the people are actually running by write-in because they got impacted by Hurricane Helene. One was in Atlanta, and one had a house in Florida that he had to go down to close stuff up and all. And so they didn't get all the petition signatures in. The judge in the New York trial said, the whole petition process, that is just so 20th century. And he's right. Paper petitions, you have to get hand signatures in an era when you can sign proxies for multi-billion-dollar deals electronically. It makes no sense. But it is what it is.
I'll go one step further. My daughter just, we were just talking about family just before we started. My daughter just got a green light card, which, by the way, parents out there, if you want to get your kids into that kind of credit card world, and honestly speaking, I said to my wife, let her screw up. Like she can't do much damage here. Let her learn the lessons early. But she gets her allowance electronically now, which just blows my mind.
And before I retired, we used DocuSign extensively, very secure. No, the NRA was back in the 90s or 80s or 70s. Anyway, so we have a full slate of people, some who were nominated, 12 who got on it by petition, 2 more that we hope to get elected by write-in votes. And I think the only person who ever got elected by a write-in was Charlton Heston. And so the key things that we're running on are integrity, accountability, because let's get real, the people who enabled Wayne LaPierre still have not been held accountable. And most importantly, transparency. The NRA should be something other than just a black box. They just had a board meeting down in Dallas, and we will probably have to wait 4 months for the official minutes. You think about any small town. I don't know about yours, but I know I've lived in small towns. They not only have the agenda for the meeting online, they have the minutes online. The town of Waynesville is now live streaming city council meetings. Why can't we do the same? If some town of 5,000, 10,000 could do it, an organization with over 3 million members should be able to do it. An organization that used to have over 5 million members. And that's also part of the problem. Trying to get it so that people will come back. I've talked to so many people said, "Oh, I'd love to sign your petition, but I dropped my NRA because I just wasn't going to buy new suits for Wayne LaPierre or private flights or waste of money." So yeah, and people can see all the candidates. And if you click on their picture, it will lead to their statement. It's called electanewNRA.com. And we also have who not to vote for. Basically, 16 people, a lot of the old timers, or what we are now starting to call the cabal, the people who enabled it, the people who signed off on the spending $200 million for an attorney who gave money to Hillary and Beto O'Rourke and really doesn't win. He sucked the life out of the NRA, is in my opinion. So, yeah.
No, I definitely see that. I mean, just in the life of the podcast, I was definitely an NRA apologist on they could go harder, but they're a big organization. They have a lot of pull, to straight up advocating, look, if you're not if you're an annual member, if you're not a life member, you can in good conscience let that lapse, because I voted in every single ballot except for the last 3, because I was just like, what's the point? And this last one, I was pleasantly surprised at how many people that are standing up for reform are getting in. And so that's good news for you. Of course, we had Amanda Suffolk on talking about her the waves that she's making in there.
Yeah, and Amanda is fully on board with the elect a new NRA. She, one of the reformers who was elected last time, Rocky Marshall's helping. She and Rocky and Buzz Mills, who owns Gunsight, are kind of coordinating it all. Definitely, we are working hard to make changes. I'm knocking on wood. I think I have probably somewhat better than a 50-50 chance of getting elected. And last time, the 4 for reform came in 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 15th out of 26 candidates. So they did good and pushed out a couple of people that had been presidents of the NRA in the past. So yeah, people want reform. They want accountability. They want transparency. One of the key things that kind of really pushed me was, I think the NRA needs to learn how to play nice with other 2A organizations and not coast on their reputation of being the 800-pound gorilla, because they're no longer that. Mm-hmm. We almost had permitless concealed carry in North Carolina until the NRA objected, because it wasn't their bill. And stuff like that has got to stop. So you and I talked about that back a year or so ago.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that was that was a travesty. And so, yeah, this is great. It's especially good to hear. I mean, I will say that I personally, and Assorted Caliber's podcast wholeheartedly endorses John Richardson, because I have known you for, what is it, it's been 15 years since we first met. And,
yeah.
And you are a true patriot and a true friend of the Second Amendment. And so,
thank you.
And you definitely stand for the type of politics that we need in the NRA. And so, yeah, I'll have in the show notes here. So go into the show notes for electanewNRA.com. And so you can click directly on that, or you can just type in the URL. Also, John's blogs, No lawyers and only guns and money. And that's a great place where you can read your musings on various issues. Where else can people find you?
Let's see. I'm on Twitter at JPR9954. I'm on Facebook. The blog has a Facebook page as well. Just look for No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money. Unfortunately, the Polite Society podcast has kind of gone into permanent hiatus, so I'm not there anymore. So I'm available for interviews anytime you want.
Well, that is awesome, and we may take advantage as things go along. So thank you so much, and good luck with your run, John Richardson.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and appreciate the endorsement.
I think it's great that the NRA is finally entering the 21st century and allowing online voting. I also think it's great, he didn't mention this, but one of the things that Judge Cohen demanded was that everyone who is running for the board gets equal representation, as opposed to previously where you would only be able to do, like, you know, your name and age and where you live, and then the people that were selected by the nomination committee got around that through a loophole by publishing information about them that was completely different. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the NRA was then making it very clear who they wanted their members to vote for. So again, another great development.
Yeah. And I mean, John, besides being an absolutely wonderful person overall, he is a longtime Second Amendment advocate. I mean, I met him back in the golden age of the gun blogs. He is absolutely one of us. He is absolutely a Second Amendment absolutist, and the type of person that we need far more of them in positions like this and in positions like ATF and things like that. They're people that like guns and like freedom and want the Second Amendment to be for everyone. So yeah, this is he gets our wholehearted endorsement. And so if you are a voting member of the NRA, I'm a life member, so therefore there was even when things were getting bad, there was no reason for me to change anything because I wasn't giving him any money, but I was still maintaining my ability to vote. And I used to vote on every single election, and I was very adamant about it. And then the last few years, I haven't bothered because it did not appear that things were above board. And now that things appear to be far more above board, I will resume my practice of voting for board of directors. And John Richardson and his endorsements will heavily weigh on my choices.
Speaking of choices, in his segment, David explores the Hillary hole.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. Those of our listeners who've been on social media recently may have noticed some posts from Smith & Wesson regarding their revolver offerings, specifically their classic line. So in this segment, I'd like to talk about Smith & Wesson and their revolver locks. Founded by Horace Smith and Daniel Wesson in 1856, the Smith & Wesson Company has had a long and respected history of firearm production. Their revolvers in particular have often been held up as standards of reliability, accuracy, and good ergonomics. After over 100 years of family ownership, the Wesson family sold its controlling interest in Smith & Wesson to the American conglomerate Bangor Punta in 1965. This turned out to be a good move at first, and the company flourished until the mid-1980s. At this point, loosening quality control, market changes, and a few other elements led to a decline, which was followed by the 1987 purchase of Smith & Wesson by the British company Tompkins plc. Towards the end of the Clinton administration, an agreement was reached between Smith & Wesson and then HUD Secretary Andrew Cuomo for certain concessions from the firearms manufacturer in exchange for liability protection and preferential treatment on certain government contracts. When this agreement came to light, the reaction from firearms enthusiasts and Second Amendment supporters was swift and brutal. Smith & Wesson sales began to plummet. However, the worst was yet to come. Due in part to the loss of revenue, Tompkins sold Smith & Wesson to the American company Safety Hammer. At first, this was seen as a positive move, bringing ownership back to the US. Then the other shoe dropped. In accordance with the HUD deal, Safety Hammer introduced their locking system to the Smith & Wesson line of revolvers. This was an internal hammer and trigger block activated by a small keyhole in the left side plate just above the cylinder release. As an aside, several manufacturers have produced plugs for the hole in the frame if the user decides to remove the lock mechanism, as long as that user is able to detail strip their revolver without breaking out in a muck sweat and fainting, that is. Critics of the Safety Hammer system were quite vocal, drowning out any owners who may have appreciated the additional safety mechanism. Some consumers were enraged by a sense of political betrayal, especially since the incoming Bush administration had stated they would not hold manufacturers to the Clinton-era HUD agreement. This is where the derogatory moniker Hillary hole first became part of the Gunsphere lexicon. Many others disliked the violation of the traditional look of their revolvers by the unsightly keyhole, using descriptive terms like zit to express their displeasure. Then there were the increasing reports of mechanical failures, where the recoil of firing could cause the lock to engage unintentionally, a problem most commonly reported in heavier caliber and lighter weight exposed hammer revolvers. This group was quite possibly the loudest faction of the three. While it was likely blown out of proportion, the unintentional locking issue did exist, and it led to a loss of confidence in Smith & Wesson's products, with a corresponding reduction in sales and revenue. Due to these and other issues, in 2017, Smith & Wesson was folded into the newly created American Outdoor Brands Corporation. This was followed only a few years later by the 2020 spin-off of American Outdoor Brands from Smith & Wesson, leaving the firearms manufacturer a relatively independent company once again. Since that transition, Smith & Wesson has seen many corporate changes, such as the relocation of a large portion of their manufacturing from Massachusetts to Tennessee, and product line changes, with the introduction of new designs as well as the reintroduction of some older ones. However, the lock persisted, perhaps until now. These changes included the announcement of no-lock versions of their classic line models 36, 10, and 19, and most recently no-lock iterations of their 44 Magnum Model 629 and 357 Magnum 686 Plus mountain guns as Lipsy's exclusives. I know I'm not alone in hoping this is a sign for the future of Smith & Wesson revolvers that will see an end to the lock and closing this regretful chapter in Smith & Wesson's long and proud history. Have fun and safe shooting.
One of the key requests that Jason had with these mountain gun series was to not have an internal lock.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brenna Bach and David Bach. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So Weer'd, I understand that there have been further developments since the recording of that segment.
Yes, David actually suggested that he might re-record this segment because Smith & Wesson has announced that the 432 and 632, which are 32 H&R Magnum J-frame revolvers, have since been added to the list of Smith & Wesson revolvers without the Hillary hole. And I noted the fact that it takes us about a week to edit and deliver the show, and by that time there'll probably be a whole bunch more. But either way, this does definitely lend some credence to what David and I think every Smith & Wesson revolver fan is hoping, which is that Smith & Wesson will be at least offering lockless versions of the gun as an option, if not just dumping the lock entirely.
I mean, while I am usually in favor of options for the consumer, it seems like manufacturing the safety lock is very complicated and adds time and expense to manufacturing, so I can absolutely understand why Smith & Wesson wants to jettison that. So this is one of the few cases where I'm not in favor of customer choice. Let's just eliminate that completely.
Yeah, and it also while you might eliminate the customer choice with the integral lock or not, you are still allowing customer choice because you can use a trigger lock, you can use a cable lock, you can use a you can use a safe. There's all sorts of options. You can just be a grown-up and just put it someplace. Since you're an adult and you live alone and there are no kids, keep it loaded in your nightstand. I don't care. But yeah, this doesn't do all that. And then adding on to the fact that having it be integral to the gun can cause some problems like the unintentional lockup. I have heard some speculation on the fact that, it is a mass-produced machine part, so there are some burrs and things that would get cleaned up over use. And so one thing that I've heard many Smith & Wesson aficionados suggest is if you do have a gun that has the zit, don't use it. Like, don't ever use it, because turning that tumbler over and over and over again will smooth it up and possibly slick up the action enough that it might engage under recoil. But yeah, this is great, and I like this. And I will say the first new gun I ever bought was a no-lock Smith & Wesson 642, and one of the reasons was I wanted to specifically send Smith & Wesson a message that, hey, this gun doesn't have a lock. I like that.
My name is Weer'd. I like revolvers.
I mean, that was literally my first carry gun. I had that for a long time, and really it only got supplanted until I got my Ruger LCR 357, which was slightly lighter and considerably more powerful. And I do like revolvers. Aaron, why don't you like revolvers?
For the same reason I don't like Model T cars.
They're antiques. The world has moved on.
I know, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for that, and that's fine. I'm allowed to be wrong.
I mean, the sales have been dropping off on it, and it's pretty hard to argue on the superiority of revolvers, especially with the world of like modern plastic fantastic guns like your Glocks and the M&Ps and such, where they just work, and they just work with boring regularity. And so the idea of it's not like, the 1911s of the day with the integral feed ramps that would just be one of those like, oh yeah, no, they don't feed hollow points, and you don't have the right magazine. They just don't work and all that. Like, yeah, just modern guns, just load them up and they shoot. So yeah, the magic of that. The one thing that you still have is still the having a semi-auto handgun in the power level of a 44 Magnum or some of the other revolver cartridges that are more powerful than 44 Magnum is pretty hard to do, but having some crazy stump puller revolvers are still pretty easy to accomplish. So if you're looking for a handgun that can split the skull of a grizzly bear, you're still looking at a revolver.
I mean, you could get a Deagle.
Yes, that is true, but well,
I'm not specifying 50 AE because they make 44, and I think they make 357 as well.
They do, and then there's a couple of other oddball calibers that are also exist in there. But I will note that while I mentioned that Glocks and M&Ps are alarmingly reliable, Desert Eagles not as much.
Fair enough. I don't have any experience with them.
Just the general, it's the nature of how they recoil and how they work, and the fact that it's a semi-auto chambered in revolver cartridges, so therefore the action is really, really, really long, and so they have a propriety to stovepipe if you like limp wrist them even ever so slightly.
I'm kind of surprised, and maybe they do. Maybe this is my ignorance showing. But you'd think that they would maybe chamber them in 357 SIG instead of, the revolver cartridge.
Oh, the Desert Eagle?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, 357 SIG will fit in any standard frame gun. So you wouldn't need to have the giant gas-operated action. That was the whole point of the Desert Eagle was the...
Well, what I'm getting at is I'm not aware of semi-autos chambered in 350. Well, okay, I know that they must exist, but I can't name one off the top of my head, and I'm not sure how common they are.
Are you saying 357 SIG or 357 Magnum?
SIG.
357 SIG was always chambered for semi-autos, and like there's a whole line of Glocks in them, and
okay, wow, I'm just super ignorant. Then I apologize for being a dumbass on the podcast.
It's a hipster caliber, and also one of the super duper interesting things about 357 SIG is it is essentially a 40 Smith & Wesson neck down, and so technically speaking, all you would need to do if you had any 40 caliber gun, if you could get a 357 SIG barrel for it, you're done. Uses the same magazine, uses the same breech face, same extractor, and even the same recoil spring. So you just swap the barrels, and congratulations, you got a 357 SIG gun now.
Cool.
You know who else is cool, Aaron?
Our listeners.
Our listeners. We're going to thank them. We thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate you being there for us. It would be pretty dumb for us to just be talking this and uploading them to the internet and no one listens to it. So
you do it, though.
I curse you, Aaron. But we got to give a very special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. So we're going to Patreon patron. Go to patreon.com/AssortedCalibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like our hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I've got a blog. It's called Weer'dWorld.com. That's WEERD.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
I will admit it, I am a dumbass when it comes to hipster calibers and revolvers. I don't like it, but I own it. Weer'd, on the other hand, is quite knowledgeable in that regard. One might even say he spurgs out. I say that with love. Our handgun knowledge is assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
It's true. Good night.